Hi, welcome home. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Jerrel from Mountain Home, and I'll be sharing my review of the Acklot double neck ukulele and bass. So this is a bass neck, and this is a tenor ukulele. Now, the description on this product is it is a mahogany instrument. It is very similar to the other ukuleles that Acklot makes, especially their, for example, their tenor ukuleles, which have a very similar build, and those are listed as having an okume neck. So I'm presuming that these are also okume neck mahogany tops, because they all look like they're made from the same materials, which is quite good because it gives the instruments a consistent feel. So if you like to collect, if you got to catch them all, they look great when they're on display next to each other. If they're all on a display stand, if they're hanging on a wall, it's nice to see these instruments all next together. They look fantastic. I generally bring up one of the things I like best about Acklot instruments is the finish that they use. Is this sort of not exactly red, not exactly brown, but it's quite lovely. It's in the middle of a sunburst range, you know. It's just such a nice color. I really just like the way they look. So with this instrument, what strikes me first off the bat is the value for money. That's one of the most important things to me when discussing reviews on these instruments. And this instrument cost me about 185 Australian, so you're probably looking at 150 US, or around there. Maybe you can find it a bit lower if I've done the conversion a bit off, as the currency exchange rate does change from time to time. So in terms of the sound, I actually quite like this sound. Now the top that they've used on this instrument is thick. It's too thick for a tenor instrument, especially when you're using ukulele strings. I might try putting classical guitar strings on here for a low G, and I'm quite certain, because I have quite a bit of experience trying different strings on different ukuleles. I feel that this instrument would really benefit from using classical guitar strings, as they are able to impart more power to the board. This sounds a little bit thin, though it is quite, it's a little bit on the loud side because it is such a large surface area to vibrate, but I can hear that the strings aren't really able to deliver power to the board that the board is asking for. Again, that's not a big deal. These just happen to come with ukulele strings. Very easy to change out. So through an amp, this sounds fantastic. This is an electrified instrument in that it has under saddle pickups, and they actually sound quite nice. So I've played a fair bit on the amp. I don't have an amp out here with me. You are also able to control your bass, middle, and treble, and your volume through your amp, and you have a built-in tuner there. So that's very nice. If you're going to be using this on stage, having that tuner built in is quite vital. You have a toggle here, so if you have the switch down, the pickup, only the ukulele will come through the amp output. If you put it in the middle, it'll play both. So if you want to do some cool stuff here like this, you certainly may. And if you flip that switch up, it will be bass only. Now these are Aquila Thunder Gut strings. One thing that I want to point out straight away that is one of the negatives is just the way it's set up. Is this rattles, this open string here, the open A, it rattles a substantial amount. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but through the amp you can hear that. And the reason that is because these strings are actually touching here. So it's quite easy to solve with a little bit of a cowboy hack. Is if you just slip something in there between the two strings, it will stop them from touching, which removes the rattling entirely. I'm not a great fan of that. You could take some of the winding out, so if you cut this A string shorter, then instead of just being very close to the string, it would actually be touching the E string, but then they would be rubbing against each other as you're tuning them. That's not necessarily ideal as well. So in this particular setup, I think this tuner here for the A, it's been placed a little too far out. It should have gone in a little more. So that's a minor flaw. It's very easy to deal with something like that. And again, you look at the value for money and the price point that this is at. There aren't any competitors in this price range. That's a very small issue to deal with. It's totally manageable. I'm just going to find something to slip in between there, and I'm going to forget that the problem is even there. It's not a big deal, and I'm more than happy to put up with that for the price that I paid. You do have a backdoor panel here so that you can run new strings down into there. You can tie a knot so that they don't slip through, and then you pull them up through the bridge. So this is one of those bridges where you have to push the string through down into the body. I do like that the door is there so you don't have to try and feed it through the sound hole in order to tie a knot. The bridge on the ukulele section does have cutouts just there so you don't have to push the string through, so it's not a push through. Numerous Acklot instruments are push through the sound or the top. I'm not a great fan of that. It's quite clumsy and it's time consuming to switch the strings, and it can be a little bit annoying. Once you get used to it, it's not really that big of a deal though. So in terms of build quality, I haven't perceived any particular flaws that really grind my gears. Everything about it feels so great, especially when you consider the price point. What I did notice is the finish in some places, particularly right in the joins here, the finish maybe didn't get enough coats, as the finish looks a bit thinner there and the color is a bit lighter. Those are just aesthetic flaws. They don't affect the playability at all. The fretboards look fine. They're not going to look like your multi-$100 instruments. They feel a little bit rough when you get your fingers on them, so I would recommend when you get this instrument, maybe remove the strings and use some fret oil so that it soaks in some oil and it sort of so the boards aren't so thirsty. I believe these boards, they're not listed, but they're very similar to Acklot's other instruments. I believe they are HPL, high pressure laminate. They're supposed to be quite tough and durable, these HPL material that they use. And I believe the bridges are a similar material as well. If you look very closely at them, they do look a little bit rough. They're not exactly smooth. But again, at the price point that you're paying, that's that's totally acceptable. From a distance, they look fantastic. When it's on stage, it looks great. Now, how does it sound through an amplification? Again, I don't have an amp with me. I thought they sounded great. I used a couple different pedals. You slap a little reverb on this tenor neck, it sounds very powerful. So the pickup is quite good in there, especially that you've got real bone. So this is a compensated bone saddle there. Both the nuts are bone, and I'm not sure if this is just some sort of synthetic plastic or whatnot, which is appropriate for the bass. The bass sounds good through the amp. I was comparing to some other U-basses that I have. I'm not entirely sure how I feel in terms of the presence. I feel like it maybe might not have the bass presence, you know, the lows, as my other basses. I'll spend more time with it. I'll try adjusting some settings and see. Those are all things that you can adjust with your amp, any effects that you have, and through your preamp here. So it's not really a big deal. I felt that it didn't have as much bass presence. Now, there is an issue to consider when you are playing this instrument through an amp, especially if you will be playing on stage and performing, is that basses really do require a bass setup and bass amps. Bass amps are really designed to bring out the sound of a bass, but this is just a single output, so you're likely going to be just playing on a general amplification. The problem with that comes with the finger noise that you get from coming into contact with the string here. When you're playing through an amp, you're going to hear your fingers rubbing against that, and it's going to squeak and sound quite scratchy, which is not very pleasant, especially if you have your volume turned up and people can hear the squeaking and scratching. So I've seen other people on YouTube address that way by saying, I'll put talcum powder on your fingers. I'm not sure if you want to be doing that on stage. You might make a mess getting powder all over your instrument. The way that I deal with that is by taking the middle and treble, and I turn them to the treble I turn down to minimum, and the mids maybe 1/4 of the way, and the bass I just have to crank that right up. And if you do that, you will not hear the creaking and the scratching from the bass. Then it becomes very pleasant. The tone is quite nice. But if you do that, you really won't be able to hear anything coming out of the ukulele neck. So that is something to consider, that it's a bit of a design flaw, It's not a huge deal, but it will impact the way that you play this if you will be performing on stage amplified. In terms of an acoustic sound, this is actually quite nice. If you are sitting at home in a quiet room and you really don't want to amplify, this actually is quite nice. I'll create more sample videos so you can get a better feel for the sound. It's very pleasant. It's louder than my fretless U bass, and if you're just sitting at home and it's, you know, you don't want to make that much noise, there's enough volume for you to actually enjoy the tone of it and the sound. So it's quite nice, and much of that has to do with just the sound, the size of the instrument top, and how much the instrument has to work with in terms of resonating a surface and generating a sound. So it's much louder than other U basses that I've tried, and certainly louder than my fretless. Now, when I ordered this, it did come with this nice bag, which is it's pretty much the exact same thing as the case that comes with the Kmise double neck that has the 8-string and the 4-string. It's quite simple, but there's sufficient padding. I didn't bring my caliper with me, so I won't be able to tell you the measurements on that. But it has this pocket where you can fit a few things. It comes with an extra set of strings for the ukulele and for the U bass. So these are Aquila Thundergut strings. If you wanted to get more acoustic volume, you could look for Thunder Reds, which they're a little bit on the pricey side, and Thunder Brown, from what I hear, is even louder than the Thunder Reds. Thunder Black is lower than Thunder Reds in terms of volume, but yeah, have a look at those if you want more acoustic volume out of this guy. There is a button strap here and a button strap at the bottom. So I have put a strap on this. It's strangely comfortable to wear while you're standing up and performing on stage with. It's a hefty instrument. It feels like a real instrument. There's weight to it. It feels quite solid. The tuners I find are quite standard. They're quite reliable. I do like this look to it. These brown tuners, they look much better than the cheap plastic one. There's a bit of translucency to them that looks quite nice if you're performing with this on stage. And again, on display, you know, this just looks fantastic. It's a great instrument. It holds its tuning quite well. I'm going to experiment with some different strings. I generally like to put classical guitar strings on these. I like to try heavier gauges when I can see that a top is quite thick. This is a thick top, but you get more sound out of this than you do with the Kmise double neck, which is it looks very similar. They're often appearing next to each other when you're looking at sales on websites. So in general, you'll get a bit more volume out of this. And again, amplified, it sounds great. I'm extremely happy with this purchase. I suspect I shall be playing this instrument for years and years to come. I'm looking forward to handing this to fellow musicians and friends and saying, hey, you've got to try this, you know. People generally, I hand people, other musicians, my fretless bass, fretless U bass, and they tend to find that very fun. You know, it's strangely, there's a satisfying sense when you play a U bass, and having frets on this one will make it easier for people who aren't experienced with the fretless to just enjoy it and get a cool sound out of it. So I appreciate you for watching the video. Thanks for stopping by. I hope my review has helped you decide whether or not you want to pick up one of these instruments. In terms of my recommendation, who I want to recommend, or who I would recommend this for, if you love ukuleles, you love the look and the sound of them, and you would like to be able to cover multiple bases in terms of if you're playing in a group or a club, it's nice having the option to play bass, and when you don't want to play bass, you can flip on over and play that. Even unamplified, this is fantastic. This will keep up with other ukuleles acoustically. The bass, you're going to want to amplify that. In the future, maybe I'll try some Thunder Reds and I'll see how those sound. and I'll report back if you get a significant acoustic projection and if it's enough to play alongside other players acoustically. So I would recommend this to ukulele players who would like to carry around a single instrument and be able to cover multiple bases. If you love quirky and interesting instruments, if this catches your eye and you're curious about that, then I do recommend this to you. If you would like the sound of, it's very close to an upright bass, you know, when this is coming through an amp. And again, I'll create some videos showing you what this sounds like coming through an amplifier. So if you do want that sound, but you don't want to have to carry around an upright bass, and if a fretless U bass is a bit too difficult for you to play because you are more comfortable with frets, this is something I absolutely recommend because you have fully functional, it's fantastic, but you also have this tenor ukulele here. So yeah, that's who I would recommend it to. I hope that my video has been useful to you. If you have any questions, if you'd like to see more or hear more, feel free to comment and let me know, and I'll see what I can do for you. So come home again soon and take care of yourselves. Please stick around. I've got more reviews and instrument modifications coming up soon. I'll see you around.